Ramon Mendoza was born on October 18, 1949 in Boyle Heights, Los Angeles. He was once an altar boy at Our Lady of Resurrection Church, but the neighborhood was a no-man's land between White Fence and Barrio Nuevo Estrada gangs. In September 1970, Mondo was inducted into LAM Angeles by Manuel Madcurian Inerva. He wasn't just another gangster, he was a predator among predators. Mondo admitted to at least 9 incidents that caused death during his time in the gang. On July 25, 1975, Mondo was released when the indeterminate sentencing law was reversed. He and Edward Sailorboy Gonzalez immediately terrorized Los Angeles drug dealers. They journeyed to Bakersfield on a vendetta mission. Danny and Ronald Reyes were Nuestra Familia drug dealers targeted by the Mexican Mafia. Mondo and Sailor caused the Reyes brothers to pass away but got caught by police. Mondo was convicted and sentenced to concurrent terms of 5 years to life. While in Kern County Jail awaiting release, Christian visitors shared the word of God. At first, Mondo ignored them, but the word forgiveness slowly crept into his mind. Mondo experienced a spiritual transformation. He chose not only to stop his ring of offenses but also to disclose his inner circle to the FBI and local authorities. He became the highest-ranking EME member to defect in the 20th century. He was involved in more than 20 EME executions before renouncing his criminal lifestyle. Mondo later wrote Mexican Mafia, the Gang of Gangs. His motivation was to get it into the hands of gang members, hoping to prevent them from following his footsteps. He appeared on podcasts sharing his story. He went from Catholic altar boy to Mexican Mafia hitman. He served most of his time in lockdown at Pelican Bay SHU, but he found redemption and became an advocate against gang violence. This is what redemption looks like. Mondo proved you can change. He admitted his offenses, he cooperated with authorities. He spent decades trying to undo the damage. The concrete walls let him go, but the memories never will. Jose Marquez was a Mexican Mafia member and San Diego del Sol street gang member. He was recruited as an enforcer for the Arella No Felix drug cartel in Tijuana. In June 1987, he was moved to San Quentin after assaulting a Norteño inmate with a shovel. In 1988, he teamed up with Roy Boy Rivas. They attempted to cause Reggie Magana to pass away. In January 1989, Marquez and Rivas stabbed a party crasher at Marquez's house. Later, they took a man from life in a Tijuana junkyard. In March 1991, acting on Bat's orders, Roy Boy Rivas and Ken Flores caused Christopher Garcia to pass away in San Diego. In April 1995, Marquez received 32 months for possessing a firearm as a felon. 1 year later, Marquez and Ruben Davis conspired to cause Roy Boy Rivas and Donald Ortiz to pass away in prison. Both dropped out of the Mexican Mafia and debriefed before they could be taken from life. In June 1997, Marquez was paroled. He ran across the border into Tijuana and joined Poppy Barron, working for the Arellano Felix organization. Mexican authorities linked him to at least 20 incidents in Tijuana, Guadalajara, and Mazatlan. In 2003, he was captured and linked to multiple offenses. He was extradited to the United States in January 2007. He used a telephone to contact Mexican Mafia associates. Those calls were recorded. In March 2011, a jury convicted him of conspiracy to distribute methamphetamine. Already convicted of 2 prior drug trafficking felonies, Marquez was sentenced to life in federal prison at age 51. This is what happens when you become a cartel enforcer. You cross the border thinking you're safe, but Mexican authorities catch you. You get extradited, and from a jail cell you orchestrate drug deals on recorded calls. A jury convicts you. You get life in federal prison. The concrete walls never let go. Martin Madrigal Cazares was born around 1978. He came up in the Colonia Cheeks gang before being inducted into the Mexican Mafia in the early 2000s. His outsized ego rubbed many members the wrong way. Thomas Grajeda mailed him a letter saying things have somewhat gone to your head. Grajeda rebuked Madrigal for abuses of his newfound authority. In 2006, Madrigal was deported to Mexico after serving a 6-year federal term. From outside the country, he controlled Sureño gangs in Ventura County. In 2012, he set up a ruling body called MESA to control gangs and drug trafficking taxes. He was so feared that rival gangs cooperated on extortion schemes. He used Edwin Sporty Mora to enforce orders on the street level. In 2013, a 35-count federal indictment portrayed Madrigal as a powerful Mexican Mafia leader. He was one of 27 people named. It was the largest indictment in Ventura County history. Charges included assaults, extortion, home invasions, narcotics trafficking, and organized criminal activity. Madrigal was stated to be a fugitive in Mexico serving a life sentence at Cifureso No. 14. But Madrigal was released from Mexican custody under unclear circumstances. On January 24, 2023, he was captured with 9 others in Rosarito carrying weapons and drugs. He was released again. In September 2023, Madrigal was shot and taken from life on a beach in Rosarito. He was wearing a Chicago Bears jersey and Santa Muerta necklace. He was shot in the back of the head. Sources say his demise may have been related to robbery of a Los Aquiles-controlled safe house. He was 45 years old. This is what happens when you control gangs from Mexico. Your ego makes enemies. You get caught with weapons. You get released mysteriously. Then someone shoots you in the back of the head on a beach. Madrigal controlled Ventura County for years, but he passed away alone wearing a Santa Muerta necklace. The violence caught up to him. Daniel Barela earned the nickname Black Dan. He was a Mexican Mafia member involved in violent criminal activities during the 1990s. In 1995, federal authorities indicted 22 Mexican Mafia members under RICO charges. The case involved racketeering, drug trafficking, and multiple incidents that caused death. The trial lasted 8 months with 275 audio tapes, 125 witnesses, and 14 videotapes of meetings. Barela participated in systematic control over Hispanic street gangs throughout Southern California. The gang operated a taxation system where street members paid a percentage of drug proceeds to LAMA. Barela enforced this through violence. Members who refused were assaulted or taken from life. Barela was involved in multiple incidents that caused individuals to pass away. On September 3, 1997, Barela was sentenced to life in federal prison without parole. Judge Ronald S. W. Liu sentenced him alongside Ruben Hernandez and Jesse Moreno, who also drew life sentences. Barela remains incarcerated in federal custody serving his life term. He will never be released. This is what happens when you enforce a taxation system for a prison gang. You collect drug money through violence. But federal RICO charges come. The 8-month trial exposes everything. You get life without parole. Barela spent decades in the gang. Now he spends the rest of his life in a federal cell. The concrete walls never let go. David Gallardo earned the nickname Smilon. He was a Mexican Mafia and Big Hazard street gang member. In early 1992, American Me was released. Director Edward James Olmos attempted to visit Mexican Mafia members for approval. They refused. The gang was enraged by portrayals showing the founder being harmed in juvenile hall and taken from life by his own followers. Charles Charlie Brown Manriquez was a consultant for American Me. He was already targeted for death after failing to carry out a stabbing at Chino State Prison in 19. His film involvement sealed his fate. On March 25, 1992, Gallardo received orders from Benjamin Topo Peters to carry out the hit. That afternoon, Gallardo tracked Manriquez to Ramona Gardens housing project in Boyle Heights. Gallardo shot him multiple times. Manriquez was taken from life. He was one of 2 American Me consultants who passed away because of the film. Gallardo was arrested. In 1995, federal prosecutors indicted 22 Mexican Mafia members under RICO. Gallardo was charged with carrying out the sanctioned hit. The trial lasted 8 months. Prosecutors showed how orders came from imprisoned leaders and were carried out by street soldiers. Evidence included recorded calls, intercepted letters, and cooperating witnesses. Gallardo was convicted on federal charges including causing death in aid of racketeering. On September 3, 1997, he was sentenced to life in federal prison without parole. He remains incarcerated serving his life term. This is what happens when you become a prison gang hitman. You shoot someone in a housing project thinking it shows loyalty. But federal prosecutors build RICO cases. They connect imprisoned leaders to street soldiers. You get life without parole. Gallardo was young when he took Manriquez from life. Now he sits in federal prison forever. The concrete walls never let go. Lal Martinez earned the nickname Lal. He was born around 1960 and grew up in Los Angeles. He was a member of LAM, the Mexican Mafia, and was involved in the gang's criminal activities throughout the 1980s and 1990s. Martinez rose through the ranks by proving his loyalty through violence and dedication to the organization. He participated in drug trafficking, extortion, and enforcement operations that spread terror across Southern California neighborhoods. In the early 1990s, Martinez became one of the key enforcers for the Mexican Mafia's street operations. He worked directly with imprisoned MEA leaders who sent orders from their cells at Pelican Bay State Prison and other maximum security facilities. Martinez was responsible for collecting street taxes from drug dealers operating in territories controlled by LAM. The taxation system was simple but brutal. Any gang member or independent dealer selling drugs in Mexican Mafia territory had to pay a percentage of their proceeds to the organization. Those who refused faced consequences. Martinez personally carried out enforcement actions against people who didn't pay or who violated gang rules. He assaulted drug dealers who tried to operate without permission. He ordered younger gang members to beat or stab individuals who disrespected LAME. He was involved in multiple incidents that caused individuals to pass away. Martinez also participated in drug trafficking operations moving cocaine, methamphetamine, and heroin through Los Angeles neighborhoods. The Mexican Mafia controlled distribution networks across the city. They decided who could sell drugs and where. Martinez helped enforce this monopoly through intimidation and violence. In 1995, federal authorities launched a massive investigation into the Mexican Mafia. The case targeted the gang's leadership structure and street operations. Martinez was one of 22 members and associates indicted under federal RICO charges. The indictment detailed years of criminal activity including racketeering, drug trafficking, conspiracy, extortion, and multiple incidents that caused death. Federal prosecutors had spent years building the case. They used wiretaps to record conversations. They flipped gang members who agreed to cooperate. They gathered financial records showing money flowing from street dealers to imprisoned EME leaders. The trial began in late 1996 and lasted 8 months. It was one of the longest gang trials in California history. Prosecutors presented approximately 275 audio tapes of conversations between Mexican Mafia members. They called 125 witnesses to testify about the gang's operations. They showed 14 videotapes of meetings between gang members that had been captured through surveillance. The evidence was overwhelming. The jury heard how the Mexican Mafia operated like a criminal enterprise. Members voted on who could join the gang. They authorized assaults and incidents against rivals, dropouts, and informants. They divided territory for drug sales and street tax collection. They coordinated criminal activities across Southern California. Witnesses testified specifically about Martinez's role in the organization. Former gang members described how Martinez collected taxes from street dealers. They explained how he ordered violence against people who refused to pay. They detailed incidents where Martinez personally assaulted individuals or directed others to carry out attacks. The jury heard recorded conversations where Martinez discussed criminal activities with other gang members. The evidence connected him directly to the Mexican Mafia's racketeering enterprise. Luis Maciel earned the nickname Pelon, Spanish slang for a bald or shaved head person. He was born around 1970 and grew up in El Monte, California. He was a member of the El Monte Flores street gang, one of the most violent gangs in the eastern Los Angeles County area. In the mid-1990s, Maciel was inducted into LAME, the Mexican Mafia. Becoming a made member of the Mexican Mafia was the ultimate achievement for any Sureño gang member. But membership came with responsibilities. New members were expected to prove their loyalty through violence. In early 1995, Raymond Huero Shai Shrirock, a 20-year Mexican Mafia veteran from the Artesia street gang, discovered that Anthony Dito Moreno was living somewhere near his home in El Monte. Moreno was a Mexican Mafia dropout. He had been a member of LAME but had left the organization. In the world of the Mexican Mafia, dropping out is considered the ultimate betrayal. Dropouts are viewed as cowards who enjoyed the benefits and protection of membership but refused to accept the consequences and responsibilities. The penalty for dropping out is death. The Mexican Mafia had placed a death sentence on Moreno's head. Any ME member who encountered Moreno was expected to take his life or arrange for his demise. Maciel recruited street soldiers from the rival Sangre gang to carry out the attack. This was unusual. The Sangre gang and the El Monte Flores gang were bitter enemies. They had been at war for years, but Maciel convinced them to work together for this hit. He told them it was sanctioned by the Mexican Mafia. He told them there would be rewards. On the appointed day, the shooters went to the residence on Maxon Street in El Monte, where Moreno was believed to be staying. They approached the house with guns drawn. They opened fire on the residence without hesitation. Dito Moreno was inside. He was shot multiple times. He passed away. His associate was also inside. He was shot and taken from life. That was expected. That was the order. But 3 innocent individuals were also inside the house. A young mother and her 2 small children. A 5-year-old daughter. A 6-month-old son. The shooters didn't stop when they heard children screaming. They didn't stop when they saw the mother trying to shield her babies. They kept firing, round after round. Bullets tore through the walls. The little girl was playing in the living room when the bullets came through. She was hit multiple times. The baby was in his crib in the bedroom. Bullets pierced the walls and struck him. The mother threw herself over her children trying to protect them. She was hit in the back and head. All 3 innocent individuals were taken from life in a hail of gunfire. It was a massacre. Blood everywhere. Bodies of children who had nothing to do with gangs, drugs, or the Mexican Mafia. In June 1995, federal authorities unsealed a massive indictment targeting the Mexican Mafia. 22 members and associates were charged under the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, known as RICO. Maciel and Shrirock were among the primary defendants. They were charged with racketeering, conspiracy to cause death, multiple counts of causing death in aid of racketeering, and drug trafficking conspiracy. The indictment specifically detailed the Maxon Street massacre. The trial began in late 1996 and lasted 8 months. Prosecutors presented approximately 275 audio tapes of conversations between Mexican Mafia members. They called 125 witnesses to testify. They showed 14 videotapes of meetings between gang members captured through surveillance. The evidence against Maciel was overwhelming. Witnesses testified that Maciel recruited the shooters. Forensic evidence placed the shooters at the scene. Ballistics matched the bullets to guns recovered from the suspects. The jury heard testimony about how Maciel bragged after the shooting about proving himself to the Mexican Mafia. The defense tried to argue that Maciel never intended for the children to pass away. They claimed he only wanted more taken from life. They said the shooters acted on their own when they kept firing into the house. But prosecutors countered that Maciel knew the risks. He sent street soldiers with automatic weapons to a residential area in broad daylight. He knew innocent people could be inside. He gave the order anyway. He was responsible for every death that resulted. Maciel was convicted on multiple counts, including causing the mother and 2 children to pass away. Because children were involved, prosecutors sought the death penalty. The penalty phase lasted several weeks. The jury heard victim impact statements from family members. The grandmother of the 5-year-old girl testified about her pain. The father of the 6-month-old baby broke down crying on the stand. The jury voted unanimously for death. Maciel was sentenced to death and sent to San Quentin State Prison. He was placed on death row in the condemned unit. The shooters who actually pulled the triggers were also convicted and sentenced to death. Michael Lerma earned the nickname Big Mike, likely due to his physical stature and imposing presence. He was born around 1965 and grew up in Los Angeles. Lerma was a member of LAMA, the Mexican Mafia, and was deeply involved in the gang's criminal operations throughout the late 1980s. He participated in drug trafficking, extortion, and violent enforcement activities that terrorized neighborhoods across Southern California. Lerma worked his way up through the ranks by proving his loyalty and willingness to use violence. By the early 1990s, Lerma had become one of the Mexican Mafia's key enforcers. He was responsible for collecting street taxes from drug dealers operating in territories controlled by LAMA. The taxation system was the backbone of the Mexican Mafia's financial operations. Any gang member or independent dealer selling drugs, running prostitution, or conducting other criminal activities in Mexican Mafia territory had to pay a percentage of their proceeds to the organization. The money flowed up the chain from street dealers to gang leaders to imprisoned MA members. Those who refused to pay or tried to operate independently faced severe consequences. Lerma personally carried out enforcement actions against people who violated the gang's rules. He assaulted drug dealers who tried to sell without paying taxes. He ordered younger gang members to beat, stab, or shoot individuals who disrespected LAME or its members. He participated in multiple incidents that caused individuals to pass away. Lerma also helped coordinate drug trafficking operations. The Mexican Mafia controlled distribution networks that moved cocaine, methamphetamine, and heroin through Los Angeles and surrounding areas. They decided who could sell drugs, where they could sell, and how much they had to pay for the privilege. In addition to drugs and extortion, Lerma was involved in other criminal enterprises. The Mexican Mafia ran prostitution rings, gambling operations, and weapons trafficking. They offered protection to criminals operating in their territories in exchange for regular payments. Lerma helped enforce these arrangements. He met with street gang leaders to collect money. He attended meetings where imprisoned EME members passed orders through visitors or corrupt guards. He coordinated with other Mexican Mafia members to divide territory and resolve disputes. In 1995, federal authorities launched Operation Black Widow, a massive investigation targeting the Mexican Mafia's leadership structure and street operations. Lerma was one of 22 members and associates indicted under federal RICO charges. The indictment detailed years of criminal activity, including racketeering, drug trafficking conspiracy, extortion, weapons violations, and multiple incidents that caused death. Federal prosecutors had spent years building the case. They used wiretaps to record thousands of conversations between gang members. They flipped several Mexican Mafia associates who agreed to cooperate and testify. They gathered financial records showing money flowing from street dealers to imprisoned leaders. Lerma was convicted on federal racketeering charges along with numerous other counts related to drug trafficking, extortion, and conspiracy. On September 3, 1997, he appeared before a federal judge for sentencing. The judge considered Lerma's extensive criminal history, his leadership role in the Mexican Mafia, and the harm he had caused to communities across Southern California. Lerma was sentenced to a lengthy term in federal prison. He was sent to the federal correctional system to serve multiple decades behind bars. Ruben Castro, earning the nickname Night Owl, possibly for his nocturnal nature, was born around 1963 and raised in Los Angeles. Deeply involved in LAM, the Mexican Mafia, Castro proved his loyalty through violence and dedication throughout the 1980s and 1990s, eventually rising to become a trusted, high-ranking member. By the early 1990s, Castro was a key operative bridging the gap between imprisoned leadership and street-level gangs. He managed the organization's control over Southern California's Hispanic gangs, acting as a criminal executive. His duties included collecting street taxes, enforcing rules through intimidation, and coordinating assaults or murders against those who violated the organization's codes. The Mexican Mafia's power relied on a taxation system where independent dealers and gangs paid 10 to 30% of their criminal proceeds to the organization. Castro was responsible for collecting these funds in his territory. He met with gang leaders to ensure payments were made and resolved disputes. If a dealer refused to pay or a member showed disrespect, Castro delivered the consequences personally, ranging from beatings to death. He also targeted dropouts and orchestrated attacks on rivals. Beyond extortion, Castro coordinated major drug trafficking operations. The Mexican Mafia moved cocaine, methamphetamine, and heroin from suppliers in Mexico and Colombia through Los Angeles. Castro arranged deliveries and collected payments, contributing to the millions of dollars the gang generated annually. In 1995, federal authorities responded to the gang's growing influence with a massive investigation. Castro was one of 22 members and associates indicted under the Federal RICO Act. Prosecutors charged him with racketeering conspiracy, drug trafficking, extortion, and violent crimes. The case was built on sophisticated surveillance, including wiretaps, financial tracing, and the cooperation of flipped associates. The trial began in late 1996 and lasted 8 months. It was one of California's most complex gang trials. Prosecutors presented 275 audio tapes of members discussing crimes, 14 surveillance videotapes of meetings, and testimony from 125 witnesses, including former members and victims. The evidence painted a clear picture of a sophisticated enterprise where imprisoned leaders dictated orders that men like Castro executed on the streets. Castro was convicted on federal racketeering charges and found guilty of participating in the criminal enterprise, trafficking drugs, and engaging in violence. On September 30, 1997, a federal judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Now approximately 61 years old, Castro has served over 27 years. He will spend the rest of his life in federal custody. The 1995 RICO case was a landmark victory for law enforcement, disrupting LAEME's operations and setting a precedent for future prosecutions. This is the reality of becoming a Mexican Mafia member. You believe collecting taxes brings power and violence earns respect. One of you rely on the gang's reputation for protection. But while you operate, federal investigators spend years building a case. They record your conversations, flip your associates, and trace every dollar. They present overwhelming evidence that ensures you never go home. Castro thought he was building a legacy. Instead, he built himself a life sentence. The concrete walls closed in on night owls, and they will never let go.
Raymond Shryock was born around 1952. He grew up in Artesia, California, a working-class city in the Gateway Cities region of southeastern Los Angeles County. Shryock was one of the few white members accepted into LAEME, the Mexican Mafia. His nickname Euro-She came from Euro, a Spanish slang term for a light-skinned or fair-haired person, combined with Eshwy, possibly referring to his demeanor or a childhood characteristic. Despite being white, Shryock grew up in predominantly Hispanic neighborhoods. He spoke fluent Spanish, he understood Mexican-American culture, and he proved his loyalty through violence. By the mid-1970s, Shryock had joined the Artesia street gang and was climbing the ranks of the Mexican Mafia. The Artesia gang was one of the oldest and most established gangs in the area, with deep ties to LAEME. Shryock became a made member of the Mexican Mafia sometime in the late 1970s or early 1980s. As a colonel, a full member of LAEME, Shryock commanded respect and fear. He was involved in the gang's operations for over 20 years. He participated in drug trafficking. He collected street taxes from drug dealers. He ordered assaults and incidents against rivals, dropouts, and anyone who disrespected the organization. Shryock married a woman named Bunny. They had children together and lived in El Monte, a city just north of Artesia. On the surface, Shryock appeared to be a family man living a quiet suburban life, but beneath that facade, he was deeply involved in the Mexican Mafia's criminal enterprise. From his home in El Monte, Shryock coordinated gang activities. He met with other EME members. He passed orders to street soldiers. He collected money from drug sales and extortion. His wife and children likely had no idea of the extent of his criminal activities, or perhaps they knew but said nothing out of fear. In early 1995, Shrirock discovered something that would lead to one of the most horrific incidents in Mexican Mafia history. Anthony Didu Morno, a Mexican Mafia dropout, was living somewhere near Shrirock's El Monte home. Morno had been a member of LAEME but had dropped out, meaning he left the gang and was no longer affiliated. In the world of the Mexican Mafia, dropping out is considered the ultimate betrayal. Dropouts are viewed as cowards who enjoyed the benefits of membership but refused to accept the consequences. The penalty for dropping out is death. The Mexican Mafia had placed a death sentence on Morno's head. Any EME member who encountered Morno was expected to take his life or arrange for his demise. Shrirock saw an opportunity. He could prove his continued loyalty to LAEME by ensuring Morno was taken from life. But Shrirock didn't want to carry out the hit himself. He was in his mid-40s by this point. He had a family. He had responsibilities. So Shrirock recruited a younger member to handle the job. Luis Pelon Mafiel was a new member of the Mexican Mafia from the El Monte Flores gang. Mafiel was eager to prove himself. He was anxious to impress the veteran EME members. Shrirock gave Mafiel the order. Find Didu Morno, take his life, show the Mexican Mafia that you're worthy of the carnal title. In June 1995, federal authorities unsealed a massive indictment targeting the Mexican Mafia. 22 members and associates were charged under the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, known as RICO. Shrirock was one of the primary defendants. He was charged with racketeering, conspiracy to cause death, drug trafficking conspiracy, and multiple other offenses. The indictment specifically detailed his role in ordering the hit on Anthony Didu Morno that resulted in the deaths of the mother and 2 children. The trial began in late 1996 and lasted 8 months. It was one of the longest and most complex gang trials in California history. Prosecutors presented approximately 275 audio tapes of conversations between Mexican Mafia members. They called 125 witnesses to testify. They showed 14 videotapes of meetings between gang members that had been captured through surveillance. The evidence was overwhelming. The jury heard how the Mexican Mafia operated like a criminal enterprise. Members voted on who could join the gang. They authorized assaults and incidents against rivals and dropouts. They divided territory for drug sales and street tax collection. They coordinated drug trafficking operations across Southern California. Prosecutors showed that Shrirock had given the order to Mafiel. They presented testimony from cooperating witnesses who explained the chain of command. Shrirock had ordered the hit. Mafiel had recruited the shooters. The shooters had carried out the attack without regard for innocent life. The defense tried to argue that Shrirock never intended for the children to pass away. They claimed he only wanted Morno taken from life. But prosecutors countered that Shrirock knew the risks. He knew that sending street shooters to a residential area could result in innocent casualties. He gave the order anyway. The jury deliberated for several days. On the verdict day, they found Shrirock guilty on multiple counts, including racketeering and conspiracy. Luis Pelon Mafiel was convicted and sentenced to death for his role in causing the mother and 2 children to pass away. The shooters who actually pulled the triggers were also convicted and sentenced to death. On September 3, 1997, United States District Judge sentenced Raymond Shrirock to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. He was 45 years old.